Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Bureau of Reclamation's virtual public meeting for the Scoggins Dam Safety Modifications Environmental Impact Statement. I'm going to give folks just a few minutes here to join the meeting and connect to audio, and we'll begin our PowerPoint presentation shortly, so please stay tuned. I do also want to note that closed captioning is available by selecting the closed caption icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you're joining us via the Zoom web portal or the Zoom app on your computer. And you may need to toggle your mouse around or press on your phone screen to get that toolbar to pop up. But we'll give it a minute here or so for folks to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, again, welcome everyone to today's meeting for the Bureau of Reclamation Scoggins Dam Safety Modifications Environmental Impact Statement. My name is Ali Yamnitsky, and I am part of the NEPA contracting team for reclamation, and I'll also be one of your meeting facilitators today. Before we get into today's presentation, I'm going to review some meeting ground rules, some tips and tricks for using the Zoom tools that we have, and review our meeting agenda. We'll then hear from reclamation staff for introductions and our project presentation. Next slide, please. So for meeting ground rules, like I said, we do have closed captioning available. So down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Zoom toolbar, and you can go ahead and select the closed caption icon, and that will turn on your closed captions. For the duration of this meeting, your microphones and videos will remain off. Unless we get to the comment session and you wish to provide verbal comment, during which we'll work through steps to unmute you. This meeting is also being recorded and will be posted to the website that's listed on the screen now. We're also going to send that website link out in the Zoom chat. So if you open up that chat, you can navigate to that webpage or copy it down for your reference. We do have question and answer session today. We will be addressing questions during that session following our PowerPoint presentation. We do also have those questions that were submitted during registration, and we will be answering those as well during that Q&A session. Following our Q&A session, we will have a verbal comment session where you can provide any verbal comment that you wish to do today. Next slide. Okay, so for the tools that we'll be using with Zoom today, so all the features that we'll be using are on the screen now. That's the Q&A box, the chat box, and the raise hand feature. The Q&A box will be used to submit questions to Reclamation about this project. You can submit questions at any time throughout the presentation. However, we will not begin answering the questions until we reach that Q&A session after the presentation. The chat box will be used for any technical Zoom-related questions or issues that you may have. If you're running into any audio or visual issues, please reach out to us via that chat box. We are also placing relevant website links, emails, and mailing addresses in here throughout the meeting, so it's a good idea to keep that open should you wish to see those. My colleague Clayton has already sent out a couple technical chats and the website link for where this recording will be posted following the meeting. So yeah, good idea to keep that open if you wish to access those. And then lastly, we'll be using the raise hand feature during the verbal comment session to indicate if you would like to provide verbal comment. Before we get to the Q&A and the comment sessions, I'll review those specific instructions before then. But if you do have any issues with Zoom, please reach out to us via that chat box. Next slide. All right, so for our meeting agenda today, in just a moment, we will hear from Reclamation staff for some introductions. We'll then get into our project presentation with a Scoggins Dam overview. We'll talk about the proposed project, the project timeline, and then we'll go into our question and answer session, followed by our verbal public comment session. And with that, I would like to introduce Rebecca Thompson with Reclamation to get us started today. Rebecca?
Hi, good evening. Thanks everyone for joining us today for the Scoggins Dam Safety Modification Project, EIS, public scoping meeting. My name is Rebecca Thompson and I work at Bureau of Reclamation at the Columbia Pacific Northwest Regional Office in Boise, Idaho. And I am the NEPA lead for this project. We have several subject matter experts that are on our team joining us today to help us with answer some of the questions that are posed. And then our project manager, Ben Miller, will be presenting the majority of the information on the project. I'll pass it over to you, Ben.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ben Miller, the project manager. First off, let me apologize. The video on my laptop decided to quit today, but you will see when I'm speaking by just the background that pops up. So do apologize for that. Next slide, please. So we'll go ahead and get through the next part, which is about the project and an overview of there. Next slide, please. So Scoggins, overview of the facility. It is an earthen fill embankment dam located west of Portland. It was constructed in 1975, and behind it, it impounds Hagg Lake as the reservoir. This reservoir, when full, covers roughly 60,000 acre feet. Next slide, please. The purpose of Scoggins Dam and Hagg Lake is first off to provide irrigation water. That is Reclamation's primary purpose. And we provide water to Tualatin Valley Irrigation District as part of the irrigation purpose of this facility. Additionally, water supply is also provided for municipal and industrial purposes to the cities of Beaverton, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, as well as Lake Oswego Commission, and again to Tualatin Valley Irrigation District. Additionally, there is a water quality portion provided to Washington County to Clean Water Services. In addition to all that, Reclamation, this facility also provides flood risk management, recreation, and supports various fish and wildlife efforts. Next slide, please. So Reclamation does own the facility. However, in an agreement in 1983 with Tualatin Valley Irrigation District, they do the operations and maintenance of Scoggins Valley Dam. In addition to this, there's also many recreation activities around Hagg Lake, which is managed by Washington County Parks and Recreation. This includes nature trails, disc golf, and various water activities. Next slide, please. So here are two images. One's a plan view of the design, as well as a picture of the facility to give two perspectives of it. As you can see that there's a lot going on behind the water reservoir of the dam. The width of the dam is approximately a half mile in length. Additional features include the spillway into Scoggins Creek and West Shore Drive, which crosses a dam, is a two-lane road with traffic barriers on either side. Next slide, please. This white line is the approximate location of the outlet work piping, which supplies water from the reservoir into Scoggins Creek. Additionally, there are facility buildings that help support the operations and the maintenance of the Scoggins Dam. This includes equipment storage, generator housing, and an outlet works building, all run by Tualatin Valley Irrigation District. Next slide, please. Okay, I won't spend a whole lot of time on this slide, but really what I want to show is there's the earthen dam is not just composed of one type of earth that we just put together. There is some complex design that goes into what the dam looks like, how the earth is put in and how it's lifted up, and the type of material that's used. Next slide, please. So some history on what's been happening. Reclamation began looking at risk to Scoggins Dam in the early 2000s. I identified potential risk at Gales Creek Fault as well as Cascadia Subduction Zone. And then starting in December of 2010, Reclamation began looking at how to mitigate seismic risk at Scoggins Dam. 5 alternatives were developed. In addition to this, Clean Water Services was investigating into how to increase benefits, such as primarily increasing reservoir storage at Hagg Lake. So in 2017, Reclamation Clean Water Services came together in a partnership and started what was known as the Tualatin Joint Project, which looked at reducing seismic risk to the facility as well as increasing reservoir storage. From that, 3 project alternatives were developed. Next slide, please. During that time, it was not quite clear how long it would take to come to a decision for the final project. So Reclamation began looking at interim risk reduction options. In 2021, a determination was made that none of the options were needed at that moment. And at the end of 2021, regarding the primary project, a decision was made to move forward with the safety of dam only alternative. So it reduces seismic risk, but does not increase reservoir storage. So that since that time, beginning in January 2022, Reclamations began moving forward with the current option for reducing seismic risk. So next slide, please. So what is driving this? The primary seismic risk associated at Scoggins Dam is the Cascadia Subduction Zone. You can see that there are the subduction zone runs from the Canada-Washington border down to Northern California. The closest point Scoggins Dam is to the subduction zone location is approximately 120 miles. And what's occurring is it's 2 plates coming together. The Juan de Fuca plate is going below the North American plate. And when this event occurs, it's anticipated to have a 9.0 magnitude earthquake that will last for approximately 3 minutes. So what could happen to Scoggins Dam in the event of this? A couple things that could lead to uncontrolled release of water, which is what Reclamation is trying to prevent. We like to control the release of water at the facility. So what could happen is an erosion of water through the dam or underneath the dam foundationally. Water could overtop the facility and come over top. And finally, there could be a failure in the spillway. Next slide, please. So this gets down to why we're doing the project. The purpose of the project is to improve public safety by reducing risk associated with severe seismic loadings while continuing to meet authorized project purposes. Reduction of risk to the facility will be accomplished through stabilizing the facility or bulking it up in preparation for severe seismic loadings associated with a Cascadia subduction zone type of event. Next slide. So here is a snapshot overview of the project. We'll look at a few of these features in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So this is a lower part, which shows where the dam is in the green with the brown hash. That will be the new footprint of the dam, essentially in the same location. The orange part between the dam and Stimson Mill is our staging and laydown area, where a predominant of the construction work will occur as well. The blue is going from the top near the reservoir on down, where it will be expanding the inlet channel, creating a new concrete spillway. And then the part that looks kind of like a stop sign, that will be the new plunge pool at the bottom of the spillway. And then out from there is the new channel to Scoggins Creek. In addition to this, on the road across the dam is going to be closed. So in order to allow for access to the southern side of the reservoir, we are creating a temporary bypass road that will be open during the construction period. You can see this on the right-hand side of the staging area and the south part. This will, yep, right there. That will be the temporary road that leads to the southern part of the reservoir. In addition to this, go ahead and to the next slide, please. So this is a plan view of the reservoir. We'll have an updated slide that shows a newer concept for the spillway. But this is a concept for what we'll be doing for the embankment part of the dam. It's additional material that goes on top. And then in the orange, you can see that Scoggins Creek has been backfilled back to where the new spillway will meet with Scoggins Creek. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a cross-section of the dam. And what's going to be happening when construction begins is part of the face of the dam will be excavated down. And then below the dam will be excavated as well until we hit towards bedrock. And then create a new shear key. That is that gray part that looks like yep, right there. We'll create a new shear key, which helps prevent lateral forces. The yellow part is a rock filter and drain, which allows water to move away from the material of the earthen facility and move away. The crest of the dam will be raised by 7 feet. In addition, the berm will be built back up with additional material. Roughly 1.5 million cubic yards of additional material will be placed on the facility. Once the facility is built up, a new 2-lane road across the dam will be placed, which will be in compliance with current design standards by Washington County and the state of Oregon. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the concept for the new spillway. The inlet channel at the top by the reservoir will be extended out and will come into a new concrete spillway, which is slightly curved, and come down to what looks like that stop sign shape will be the new pool that it comes down into. From there, it will a new channel will be excavated similar to what's already out there to run into Scoggins Creek. In addition, that what looks like the backward 7, which is laying down, is new outlet work piping. That will all be underground, but that will be what predominantly provides water to Scoggins Creek and all the downstream purposes. It is anticipated to have the spillway operational during the entire time. The shift from one spillway to another would occur during the natural drawdown of the reservoir. In addition, the shift in the outlet works will occur when the reservoir elevation is high and water can be provided through the spillway. So we're going to try and make sure that water is provided to all the downstream purposes without any interruption during construction. Okay, next slide, please. So we mentioned the amount of material that's going to be needed for the dam, and where are we going to be getting that? We're looking at reclamation lands to be able to get this material. We did investigate previous borrow areas that were used, which are south of Scoggins Dam, but there was not enough usable soil in the area to be able to for what's needed for this project. So we have identified 3 spots on the north side of the reservoir. moving from the south up, we've got borrow site B. In the middle is borrow site F. And then the top one is borrow site H. And that one's split into two, but we consider it one borrow site area. So as you can see that there is a yellow road that extends up to the first two borrow sites. This would be a construction road, or a haul road, if you will, next to the county road, which would be used strictly for the construction traffic to move material from the borrow area to the facility. And that green line up top, Rebecca will get back into, but that is the county road. And at the other part on here, you see the little orange that was investigated for a borrow site, but at this point it would work better for a staging and lay down area. So that's what we're looking at using it for. So at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rebecca Thompson to talk about the environmental alternatives.
Thanks, Ben. We'll go ahead and thank you. All right, so the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, requires that we analyze a reasonable range of alternatives in the environmental impact statement. And so part of the purpose of public scoping is to solicit feedback from the public on areas or issues of concern to you, as well as potential alternatives for meeting our project purpose in need. We've identified a few preliminary alternatives for this project to address accessing the borrow sites and transporting excavated materials to the dam site. And these will be further, these will be further developed following receipt of public comments and the close of the public comment period. To date, the action alternatives that we are considering will all have the same structural dam safety design as the proposed action. So the same proposal at the dam site that Ben just described. One of the ways that they might differ is in the methods of how to access the borrow sites. So we're looking at various different road options for accessing these sites and hauling the materials to the construction area and the staging area. So for example, one option that we could look at is not constructing a haul road at all, but just using Scoggins Valley Road, which shows up in green on the top, but is also parallel to the yellow constructed road down below. So the project could be constructed in that way. What it would entail would be a smaller dump trucks sharing the road with the public, as opposed to having the construction traffic being on a separate standalone road. It could lead to traffic delays. The public would need to share the road with dump trucks. There's also logging traffic on that road. So that's one option. Another option could be, instead of constructing the road all the way up to the middle borrow site, is we could just construct the road to the first borrow site and then use the county road to access the materials at the upper two sites. So the advantage of having a constructed road is construction traffic would not be on the county road. It would allow those that are constructing the project to use larger dump trucks, which are probably 3 times larger than those that can share the road, the county road. So they'd be able to move much larger quantities of material at a time, which would reduce the amount of truck trips needed to modify the dam. So if we use the county road, it would be smaller trucks, a lot more truck trips. If we had a constructed road, it would be bigger trucks, less truck trips. However, you can see the yellow, the solid yellow, that is fill that would be required to build the road. So as some of you know, it's pretty steep in places on the road. So there's quite a lot of work required to build this road, and it will be visible on the landscape after the road is reclaimed. So as you can see, there are trade-offs for whatever option and combination of road use that we may analyze. So another way that the alternatives could differ is on the level of visual screening of the borrow areas and the protection of recreation trails. So this is being considered because there are hiking trails, the Hagg Lake Loop Trail, that intersects with the proposed borrow areas. And also the county road around the reservoir is a designated scenic route. So as you can see on this figure, there's a bunch of little white hikers. Those are trailheads. And then the white trail, which there you go, that's the Hagg Lake Loop Trail. As it enters the center and southern proposed borrow site, that it turns blue, which is basically to show that the trail would be impacted by the borrow site. So according to this figure and this particular option, the proposed action that we're looking at, those sections of the trail that show up in blue would need to be closed during the construction period. And we are still determining which borrow sites definitely need to be used. We know at a minimum we need one. We might need all three, and it sort of depends on the configuration of these borrow sites, as well as the amount of material that can be excavated from each of these borrow sites. So an option, so we're going to start by excavating as much of the material as possible from the closest borrow site, that would be B. And once that one is depleted, then we would go to the next borrow site and start excavating that. And note, to excavate a borrow site, there's mature forest in these areas that would need to be removed. And so another option we're looking at is pulling back the boundaries of these borrow sites away from the lake so that essentially they are smaller. And by doing that, it would allow an area where we could move the trails so that we could maintain trail access during construction, and also leave a visual buffer so that when you were looking at these areas from the lake or across the lake, they would be partially visually screened, as opposed to looking like a clear cut all the way down to the water. So there are some benefits of doing that. However, if we make the first borrow site smaller, it's going to increase the chances of us needing to get more borrow materials from the center and the northern borrow site. And so again, we will likely be looking at different alternatives, looking at these different approaches, and then we will be weighing the pros and cons, and our decision maker will be making a decision on which alternative should be moved forward based on the consequences to the environment that are disclosed for each alternative. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So this slide shows the high-level milestones for the project schedule. The draft EIS will be published in either late 2024 or early 2025. The final EIS will be published around fall of 2025, with the record of decision published by winter of 2025-2026. So either December of 25 or January of 26. We have 2 years that we are allowed to prepare an EIS. There's a requirement that it must be completed the record of decision must be published 2 years from the date that the notice of intent is published, which was January of 24. So no later than January 2026 will be the record of decision. And our designers are working on the project engineering design right now, and it's scheduled for completion by 2027. And if the NEPA alternative is chosen, or if the NEPA alternative that is chosen is one of the action alternatives, construction is anticipated to begin in spring of 2029 and would take approximately 6 years to be completed by 2035. Next slide, please. So throughout the NEPA process, there are 3 opportunities for public engagement. The first one is public scoping that we are engaging in right now. It started January 25th and it will complete February 26th. And that is the date that all public comments must be received for consideration in the draft EIS. And on the flow diagram to the right, the blue bubble is where we are right now. So following this meeting, we will be working on consolidating the comments that we received during public scoping. We'll prepare a public scoping report, which will be posted on our website. And then we will be developing alternatives for consideration in the draft EIS. Once the draft EIS is published, there will be a 45-day comment period. During that period, there will be public meetings, both in person and virtual, and the public are encouraged to provide substantive comments on the draft EIS, which will be considered in the final EIS. Reclamation will provide notice to interested parties and residents near the dam and the lake when this EIS is available. We will use the same methods of communication that we did for scoping, including press releases, newspaper articles, email blasts, and website posting, to name a few. And then there's one additional opportunity for public review. So after that 45-day public review of the draft EIS, we will begin preparing the final EIS. We will include and address the comments on the draft EIS in the final EIS. And then when the final EIS is published, there is a 30-day period where the public can review that document prior to the record of decision being published. And there will not be any public meetings. However, if you do provide comments, they will be considered when preparing that record of decision. So that concludes our presentation. We'll transition now into our question and answer session.
Thanks, Rebecca. So we'll go ahead and move into our Q&A session. I'm first going to review just some guidelines and then instructions on how to submit a question, and then we'll go ahead and get started with some answers. So you can see on screen, and we'll leave this slide up for the duration of the Q&A session, but there's just some visual instructions on how to submit a question. So we have the Q&A box icon highlighted there. That's going to be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen along the toolbar. If you are joining us by computer, you may need to move your mouse around to get that toolbar to pop up. And if you are joining us by phone or a tablet, you may need to press on your phone screen to get the toolbar to pop up as well. Once you have that open, you can go ahead and type in your written question and submit it. That will send it to us, and then we'll work to develop an answer for you. We do also have those questions that were submitted during registration. We'll answer those ones first before getting to any questions that have been submitted during today's meeting. And I don't see that we have any phone callers joining us today, but if you are joining by phone and do not have access to the Q&A box, you can press *9 and we'll walk through submitting a question that way. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Our first pre-registered question is, how does Reclamation plan to communicate with the neighbors and the public about its construction impacts? Are there any ways to mitigate impacts? And we'll hear from Rebecca for that answer.
The impacts from construction will be disclosed in the draft and final environmental impact statements, and these documents will be publicly available and communicated via postcard mailings, paper ads and other media outlets, as I just described. Reclamation will implement best management practices and other design features when and where feasible to mitigate impacts. And we will be developing those best management practices as we determine the potential impacts of this project.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. We'll move on to our next pre-registered question, which is what new opportunities will this provide for trail users around the lake or campgrounds? And we'll just go back to Rebecca for that answer.
Reclamation's dam safety modification proposal does not include development of new recreation opportunities, as that is outside of the scope of this project, which is focusing solely on dam safety. There is the potential that some parts of the Hagg Lake Loop Trail may need to be rerouted and or reconstructed during or following construction. However, the recreation opportunity will be the same post-construction as it is now. We encourage the public to engage with Washington County Parks about possible improvements to recreation at Hagg Lake.
Thanks, Rebecca. We'll go ahead onto our next pre-registered question, which is, does this project also lead into potentially expanding the dam and the reservoir? Just looking for a potential timeline. And we'll hear from Ben for that answer.
Thank you, Allie. And the answer is no. The proposal being addressed is to modify the existing dam in regards to public safety concerns associated with seismic loadings. While the current plan increases the size of Scoggins Dam, it does not impact the size or elevation of the reservoir. Thank you, Allie.
Thanks, Ben. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question, which is how much money will this cost? And we'll go back to Ben for that answer.
All right. The cost is still being refined as the project designs develop. Preliminary cost ranges, which were developed in 2022, put the project range between $600 million to $1.5 billion.
All right, we'll move on to our next pre-registered question. The question is, what are the plans to reroute athletes during events that circumnavigate the lake? And we'll hear from Rebecca for that answer.
So Reclamation will work with Washington County Parks during construction to minimize potential disruption to recreation events such as races, and safety considerations will be prioritized for any reroutes that are needed.
Thanks, Rebecca. We'll move on to our next pre-registered question, which is, will there be information about the breaching of the dam and water flow down the river? And we'll hear from Ben for that answer.
Thank you, Allie. Yes, the Reclamation's Dam Safety Office does look at a dam breach option and is considered as part of the dam safety project. This option will be addressed at some level within the EIS and has not yet been determined in what detail that will be considered. But more options about the breach can be reviewed when the draft EIS is released.
All right, on to our next pre-registered question. And this has a few questions in there with it. With the work being done on the dam, how can additional recreation opportunities be incorporated? Could the proposed borrow pit be considered for a future trail system or campground? With the increased popularity of electric devices, could a small area be developed for kids to ride bikes? Being a resident of Forest Grove, I feel like Hagg Lake has a lot to offer in the local community for members in the way of trails and campgrounds. And I believe we'll hear from Rebecca for that answer.
So Reclamation's dam safety modification proposal does not include development of any new recreation opportunities, as again, that is outside of the scope of this project, which is solely focused on dam safety and public safety. Washington County Parks serves as the lead organization for recreational improvements at Henry Hagg Lake, and we encourage the public to engage with Washington County Parks about possible improvements to recreation at Henry Hagg Lake. So as some of you may know, Washington County is working with us on updating an old campsite. So the way it works is if Washington County has a proposal, they bring it to Reclamation, and we would be addressing it outside of this project, but possibly under a separate NEPA effort.
Great, thanks, Rebecca.
Mhm.
And our next pre-registered question is, what will the timeline be and what is the workaround for circumnavigating the lake? And we'll hear from Ben for that answer.
Thank you, Ellie. The timeline for construction is approximately 6 years. The construction would begin in 2029 and end approximately in 2035. And for circumnavigating the lake, as provided earlier in the slide when we were looking at the staging area, there's going to be a temporary paved road which is constructed to access the southwest side of the Henry Hagg Lake. That will be in between the construction area and Stimson Mill.
All right, thanks, Ben. And that was our last pre-registered question so far. So I guess that is the end of the pre-registered questions, and we'll now move into any questions that have been submitted during the meeting. So I did see a few questions come in through our Q&A box, and we are currently working to find information to develop those answers for you. It may take us just a moment here as we are in this virtual setting, and we appreciate your patience with us as we work through that. So we'll take a brief pause here just to make sure that we're getting all the best available information out, and then we'll go ahead and begin answering some of those questions that we've just received. All right, so our first question is, were other borrow sites considered on the west side versus the east side of the lake? And we'll hear from Ben for that answer.
Hi, thank you for your question. Yes, other borrow site areas were considered. The borrow sites that we looked at were B, F, and H, and we looked at all the letters in between A and H. So there were several ones that were investigated. The west side has concerned with endangered species, wildlife, and plant species. Additionally, we were trying to reduce the footprint with less impact to travel and roads. There were a couple that were on the north side of the county road, and we figured that may have a larger impact to traffic as well. So existing borrow sites from the construction area were also looked at, but again, there was not much material left to be used that could further benefit this upcoming project. In addition, we as Reclamation also reached out to some private landowners within the area to see if they may be interested in doing a transaction for use of land and getting borrow material. And unfortunately, we just weren't able to move that direction. So the three options that were shown during the presentation at this point are what Reclamation feels are some of the best options moving forward for accessing borrow material. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks for that question as well. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question, which is, I would like to see the trail loop open throughout the process. And we'll hear from Rebecca for that answer.
Thank you for your comment. Reclamation will work with Washington County Parks to reduce potential impacts to trail users throughout the entire construction period. And we have been working closely with Washington County Parks throughout our NEPA process to try to develop possible alternatives to reduce potential impacts to the trails. And Washington County Parks are also one of the cooperating agencies on this project. We've discussed including an alternative that realigns trail sections to maintain the entirety of the loop trail during construction, and also putting up construction fencing to ensure safety of recreation users. The important thing is safety of the public, as well as safety of the project. We also encourage you to state your concerns about the trail systems after the Q&A session, when we will open it up for public comments.
Thanks, Rebecca. And yeah, I'll just touch on the verbal comment session that we'll be moving into after we finish with these questions. And then if you do have a comment that you would like to submit, especially with this one, it sounds like keeping the trail loop open throughout the process, we would encourage you to submit your verbal comment then. All right, moving on to our next question. I understood in the discussion that there was some material removal required also. Where will this material be stored? And we'll hear from Ben for that answer.
Hi, thank you for the question. Yeah, I understand the discussion. Where will material be stored? So looking back, I know we can't go back to the slide, but there was a slide that had showed the green and brown hash mark of the dam, and then there was a large orange portion there, which is between Scoggins Dam and Stimson Mill. That's a large laydown facility area. So that is the primary location where material will be stored as the construction moves forward. One important thing is what we're looking at is a phased construction as well. So if we start, say, at the south side of Scoggins Dam and begin excavation there, as it moves north and we finish up work on the south, we'll begin backfilling that. So we're not going to be completely, the plan would not be to completely excavate all the material from the dam, put in the shear key all at once, and then backfill everything all at once as well. It would be a phased construction because this is a lot of material that we're looking at. And so hopefully that answers the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. All right, let's go on to our next question. Is there going to be any movement of any of the facilities operated by Washington County Parks? And we'll hear from Rebecca for that answer.
The only facility operated by Washington County Parks that will be relocated is their water pump house that's located down in the staging construction area. All other recreation sites and facilities will stay open during the construction of this project. As mentioned previously, there may be some trail closures or trail realignments within the borrow areas. Note also that there will be a temporary fee area positioned along the temporary access road for the public that are traveling to the west side of the dam to Southwest Shore Drive. The main fee station on Scoggins Valley Road will remain open for traffic going north. And the Washington County Park offices next to the dam will remain in place, and we'll have a safety fence erected to separate it from the construction activities. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. All right, we're going to take another just quick pause here. We do have several more questions that have come through our Q&A box, and we are working behind the scenes to develop those answers and pull all out the right information for you all. So again, just as we're in this virtual space, we appreciate your patience with us. And again, just want to say we appreciate everyone's patience with us. We do still have several questions queued up here that we are working to develop answers for and just make sure that we're finding the best possible information to best answer your questions with. So as we're in this virtual space, we just appreciate your patience with us. All right, we do have one question ready to go, which is, please leave a barrier of trees between the lake and the borrow areas. And we'll hear from Rebecca for the response to that.
Thank you for this comment. Leaving a visual buffer between the lake and the borrow sites is being discussed as one of the alternatives to be considered in the EIS. We would also encourage you to state your concerns about the trail system after the Q&A session during the verbal public comment period or through the other methods of receiving comments that will be described at the close of this meeting. All comments and suggestions about potential alternatives or alternative components will be considered when we are developing alternatives for this project.
All right, and our next question is, since the previous contract to maintain meadows for elk and deer has expired, have you considered revamping a new meadow maintenance plan for the said wildlife? And we'll pass it back to Rebecca for that answer.
Thanks for your question. This has not been considered at this point in our project since the existing meadows have met the needs of wildlife. Reclamation had former requirements with ODF and W to manage some of the meadows near the lake for elk habitat. However, those requirements expired a couple years ago, as mentioned. We will analyze the impacts of this project on wildlife in the EIS, including potential loss or even indirect creation of new habitat. And we will coordinate with ODF and W to see if they have any potential concerns.
All right, our next question is, will the acre feet capacity of the lake be reduced during the construction phase? And we'll hear from Ben for that answer.
Thank you, Ali. Our goal is that during the construction period, there will be little to no impact to reservoir operations or water deliveries downstream during construction. Everything would occur during the normal cycle that occurs at Hagg Lake. Thank you, Ali.
All right, and our next question is, my driveway is in the third borrow site. Can you please elaborate on how it will affect my driveway? And we'll go back to Ben for that answer.
Sure, thank you for the question. It's a very good one. So we are currently reviewing individual access points that may be impacted by the various alternatives. Our aim as reclamation is to eliminate or reduce impacts to private access points as much as possible. We will know with more certainty if any access point will be impacted based on the selected alternatives and how much fill is required. At that time, we'll be able to speak with more clarity on potential impacts and possible solutions. Until then, our hope is to use material closest to the facility, which are located at borrow locations B and F, the ones closer to the facility, first. If there is a need to access material from borrow area H, the one furthest north and furthest from Scoggins Dam, Reclamation would reach out and contact the owners who have authorized easements running through this borrow location, discuss the work, and how best to conduct the work while making a least impact as possible to the driveway and those that use it. Thank you, Allie.
Thanks, Ben. And did you want to go back to the map that shows the borrow sites and just maybe clarify which ones are potentially being included or potentially not?
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, so going from the bottom part of the slide up, that borrow site on the bottom is that's borrow site B. The one in the middle is F, and the one up top is H. And you'll see that H actually has a cutout to it. That's currently where the easement runs along. So we're already looking at trying to not to provide little impact, and we recognize where easements are at for the homeowners that need to access their property through these locations.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Perfect. We can go back to the Q&A slide. And we do have one more question that we're working on. If there are any additional questions that folks have for Reclamation about this project, please go ahead and enter them into our Q&A box. Once we've finished providing answers for these questions and we don't have any outstanding questions left, we'll go ahead and move on into our verbal comment session. All right, looks like this last question is ready to go. So this question asks, what erosion mitigations will be considered when constructing and operating the borrow areas as well as the new construction road? And we'll hear from Rebecca for that answer.
Thank you for that question. There are a number of best management practices that we are evaluating for this project, and they'll continue to be further detailed as our design progresses of the borrow sites and the roads and the dam, and as we further evaluate the potential impacts of the project. So once we have a better understanding of where the potential impacts are, then we will be developing best management practices to implement where feasible to reduce the potential for erosion. Erosion controls will be used both during construction and during rehabilitation of the borrow areas. Examples could be the placement of geosynthetic materials like straw wattles, installing water control structures, as well as how we go about recontouring the borrow sites once the excavation is complete. And then areas that, disturbed areas, once we're through using them, they will be reseeded at the earliest time possible to also help stabilize the soil. Also of note, we will be implementing a stormwater management plan to address the potential runoff from impervious materials. This is a requirement that we will have from the National Marine Fisheries Center as part of our Endangered Species Act consultation. Thank you.
All right, and thanks for that answer, Rebecca. So that is all the questions that we've received so far through our registration and then through the meeting today. So I do want to go ahead and do just a final call for any questions that folks may have. If I don't see any other questions coming in, I'll go ahead and move us into our verbal comment session to accept any comments that folks may have today. I do want to note that our meeting is scheduled through 6 p.m. Pacific time, and we will remain on the meeting until that time. So should we get through verbal comments and have time remaining, if there are additional questions after this last call, then we can go ahead and answer them at that time. So we'll give it a minute here for any final questions before we go ahead and move on to verbal comments. All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions come in. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and move us into the verbal comment session. But again, if you do have any further questions, we are on this meeting until 6 p.m. Pacific time. So please feel free to add those to that Q&A box. All right, so just like we did with Q&A, I'm going to review just some instructions and ground rules for verbal comments, and then we'll begin accepting those verbal comments. So we will be accepting comments in the order of registration. We did not see any folks indicate during registration that they would like to provide comment. So we will just open the floor to anyone who would like to provide comment today, and then go in order of hands raised. So you'll be using the raise hand feature. That's going to be down at the bottom of your Zoom screen along the toolbar, right by where the chat box and the Q&A box are. If you go ahead and raise your hand, that will indicate to me that you are ready to prepared and ready to offer verbal public comment. I'll then go ahead and call on you. We'll walk through the steps to unmute you, and then you can go ahead and provide your comment. I will also ask that you spell your first and last name for the record before you provide your comment. And please note that your comment and name will be included in the project record. All right, if we can go to the next slide. The last piece that we have for instructions today is we do have a 3-minute timer on screen. This is to ensure that we're able to hear from everyone who has joined us on the meeting today. If you don't feel that you are able to provide your full comment within the 3 minutes, we do have several other avenues by which we're accepting comments. We will review those on the last slide of our presentation after we conclude this comment session. You can also access the virtual website that we've linked in the chat a few times, and there's a comment form on that site as well. And we'll review all of those steps at the end of our presentation. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to anyone who would like to provide comment. If that's you, please go ahead and access that raise hand feature. Again, that's going to be at the bottom of your screen along that Zoom toolbar, and you may need to move your mouse around or press on your tablet or smartphone screen to get that toolbar to pop up. Once I see a raised hand, I'll go ahead and call on you, and we'll walk through the steps to unmute you to provide comment. All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised yet, but just like with Q&A, I want to give it a minute or so here before we move on. The remaining portions of our presentation today are going to be reviewing the avenues by which you can submit written comment. So I do want to make sure we are able to get to that today. We'll give it a minute here before we move on to that final piece of information. And then again, we will be here until 6 p.m. should you have further questions or wish to provide verbal comment. All right, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So in order to make sure everyone's getting the information that we have in our presentation, I'll go ahead and move us on to our final slide. Perfect, thank you. So on the slide now, we have a couple of different options by which you can submit written comments. We have a virtual meeting room, which is just a website that includes a comment form. This link is going to be available in the chat box. We also have an email address, and you can email your comments to us. That link will also be available in the chat. And then we also have the Reclamation Regional Office, and you can mail or drop comments off at that location. We do have that on screen, and then we'll also be sending that out via the chat as well, so you can copy that down should you wish to. We do ask that comments be submitted or postmarked by February 26th. And please be advised that the entire submission, including your personal identifying information, may be made publicly at any time as part of the project record. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rebecca Thompson for some closing remarks. However, again, I do want to note we are on this meeting until 6 p.m. Pacific time. So if you do have any further questions or you wish to provide verbal comment, please just access that raise hand feature or submit questions through the Q&A box.
Thanks, Allie, and thanks for all of you for attending tonight. Your time and your participation are greatly appreciated, as well as any public comments that you submit. Reminder, February 26th is the deadline for posting comments. Before including your address, phone number, email address, or other personal identifying information in your comment submission, please be advised that the entire submission, including your personal identifying information, may be made publicly available at any time. So while a commenter may request that Reclamation withhold personal identifying information from public review, we cannot guarantee that it will be able to do so. We look forward to receiving your comments. As I mentioned previously, they will be very helpful in helping us determine what issues to analyze in detail in the environmental impact statement, as well as what alternatives or components of alternatives we should also evaluate. I encourage you to go to the virtual public meeting room. There's a lot of good information on that site, and we will be updating any of the frequently asked questions. There's several frequently asked questions in there, and we'll be updating those as the project progresses. There is a tab for how to submit public comments that goes through all the different methods, again, for submitting the comments. To be most helpful, we ask that your comments be specific. They can provide us new information about the project, new data. You might identify a different way that we could meet the project purpose and need, or suggest alternative methodologies for analysis and the reasons why those should be used, or make or provide some sources of credible research or data. That information would be very helpful. Comments that you're welcome to submit, but will not help us in determining alternatives or issues would be opinions or votes in favor or against the projects, or just open-ended vague questions. So try to be specific, and we look forward to receiving your comments. Thanks so much and have a great evening.
All right, everyone, and just a reminder that while we have completed our presentation for today, we are still here for another 35 more minutes as it is about 5:25 p.m. here Pacific time. So if you do have any further questions or verbal comments that you would like to submit, please go ahead and either raise your hand or submit questions through the Q&A box. All right, and just another reminder, as we are at 5:35, so we have about 25 minutes left in our meeting time this evening. And while we have finished our presentation, we are still available to answer any further questions or accept any verbal comment that you may have. All right, and just a last reminder, it is now 5:45. We have about 15 minutes remaining in our meeting today. And while we have finished our presentation, we are still available to answer any further questions or accept verbal comments should you have any. All right, everyone, we have reached 6 p.m. So this will end our meeting. Thank you again for your participation and engagement today.